Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 10th Tualatin City Council meeting. Tonight we have the pleasure to have Troop 530 here to help us with the Pledge of Allegiance. So let's go ahead and stand and start the Pledge of Allegiance with the Boy Scouts. The Scouts, shoot. One more chance.
Please place your, all right, you already did that, all right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. All right. They left, okay. I was going to have them talk about themselves, but they left. Guess not. They got homework to do, yeah. They want to go home. Yeah. All right. So now we're up to announcements. So we have the update on the Tualatin Youth Advisory Council activities for February 2020. Welcome.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor Bubnik and members of the council. My name is Ethan Bennett,
I'm Tyler Goodell.
And I'm Sarah Darby.
and we are here to update you on the Youth Advisory Council activities. We will be heading to Salem on February 21st for the 3rd Annual Oregon Youth Summit. It is at Willamette University, and we are meeting with other youth councils from across the state.
Next, we'll be heading off to the National League of Cities in Washington, D.C., March 8th through 11th. We will be working on leadership development, civic engagement, and networking. That will be me and Ethan going, and we're super excited.
And then now we're currently working on our Project Friends, which is our bullying prevention program. And it's Friday, April 17th, and it includes Bridgeport, Byram, and Tualatin Elementary. And we're updating our lessons right now.
Thank you for your continued support.
That was quick. Can you go back to the slide about going to Salem?
Yes.
So what are you going to be, are you going to be meeting with legislators by chance and making sure they do their job?
We did actually hear that the governor will be speaking to the group, but we won't have time for individual meetings.
All right. Well, just keep the doors locked, keep the doors closed so the certain parties can't leave. How about that? All right. And then on DC, two of you are going?
Yes.
All right.
us two.
All right. That's cool. Bridget and I are going, so we'll be joining you there. All right. Any questions, comments? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're now up to public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for anyone to address the city council on an item that is not on tonight's agenda. Please keep your comments to about 3 minutes. If there's anyone here who'd like to address the council, this would be the appropriate time. I have a few sign-ups. I will take those first, but you do not have to sign up. So after I'm done with the sign-ups, if you'd like to come on up, please feel free to do that. So first one I have is Cindy Hilliard. Welcome.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for having me. I'm Cindy Hillier. I am the director of Tualatin Together. I'm also a 21-plus year resident of the city of Tualatin, and actually I'm employed by Tualatin Together. I wanted to kind of clarify who Tualatin Together is and what we do, since they're, especially here at City Council, I've heard Cindy's Club, Cindy's Group, the anti this and that club, and I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to get to share with you who we are, what we do, why we do what we do, and hopefully at the end of that we can be seen as a resource for how you're moving forward with a variety of things in the community, because honestly, at our heart and soul, that is who we are, and what we want is for a healthy, happy community. And yes, we do have some additional health standards that we do take a look at that. So the mission of Tualatin Together, we just updated it, and we're really proud of this. Tualatin Together works to make our community a place where we talk about mental health and substance misuse challenges. We actively promote the health of our youth and families by building resilience and providing resources to help people live their best lives. Some of the things you may not be aware that we do: we have a Dress to Dream program that is a homecoming, prom, and work clothing storage. Literally, I have 4,000 pieces of clothing in my tiny little portable at Byram Elementary School. We do QPR, or suicide prevention trainings, and also assist trainings that we offer for free to the community. We do parenting classes around being trauma-informed and building resilience as for parenting, and we do all of these things in English and in Spanish. We engage our youth in training opportunities. As you know, we've taken many groups to Washington, D.C. for the exact educate, advocate, and plan for prevention in our communities, the same as the Youth Advisory Council, only it's called a little bit something different. We also engage the community to discuss the tough topics that you all are talking about, some of them, but also the mental health side and those sorts of things. We are a nonprofit that started in 1991, and we are comprised mainly of community members, and I think most of you are on our distribution list, and if you aren't, then my apologies, and I will, please let me know and I will correct that. I haven't seen any of you yet at our coalition meetings. We do meet, well, except for Paul, who's the treasurer of Tualatin Together long since before he was on city council. At any rate, what we are not, I'd like to share what we are not really quickly. We are not zealots for or against responsible adult use of substances unless they're impacting our youth. And I think we'd like to make that very clear. What we are is an inclusive group that's open to learn. We're a resource for many in the community, and we're eager of meaningful conversation around all topics to help make our community the most livable and best place to live.
Go ahead.
I do, yeah. And so a normal day for me is working in our schools with our students. I see the abuse of drugs and alcohol on a daily basis. I get phone calls from parents in our community. What are resources to marijuana help? What are resources to alcohol help? Those sorts of things. And so when I come and speak, and I am so passionate about the drug and alcohol prevention work that we do in our community, please understand it's because our community is reaching out to me on an almost daily basis for the things that you don't see. Many of you don't have children in middle school and high school, and the real things that are happening in our community between mental health and substance misuse are coming through me. And I would like to be able to be seen as a partner through Tualatin Together as we work through these things. And I hope that through this process, I can tell you that the month of April is 420, the whole month, the International Smoke Pot 420 at 420. It's the, anyway, long thing. And our youth have many things, including a Wolf Wellness Week. They're doing Drug Facts Week. It's an international or a national thing the week before. And the youth are really stepping up to the plate to be heard and to provide community service so that we can come together as a community and not see. I've been at bedsides in the last 5 months of 3 sophomores who, because of substances and afraid to talk to their parents about it, have tried to commit suicide. And that is the platform I come from every time I come here to speak with you. Thank you.
All right. Jeanette Chafee. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, Council. My name's Jeanette Chafee. I've lived here over 17 years, homeowner, best city in the world to live in, as you probably concur. I emailed you, and I also have copies for you. I'm going to read my letter. I concur with Council President Nancy Grimes and Councilor Paul Morrison to keep the current law of a 3,000-foot buffer zone from marijuana sales. It's important to keep sales limited away from schools, parks, residential zones, and the library, away from I-5, and no billboards. What is driving this possible change in the law after over 4 years? Do you want more dispensaries? What's the point? Keep the current law of 3,000-foot buffer zones. Why would you want to change this current law and expose our children to the temptation of marijuana, having someone possibly buy it for them? Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Next up is Anthony Stewart.
Good evening, Council.
Welcome.
Hope everybody has a good Valentine's Day coming up this week.
Your,
There were a couple of points.
your microphone turned off.
Oh, it's by touching her.
There you go.
Is that on now? Good evening, Council. My name is Anthony Stewart here on behalf of Western Oregon. I've met or seen plenty of you a number of times before. A point that was brought up, I just wanted to mention it because it was in the last speaker. With regards to billboards, it hasn't been a part of our discussion, at least that I've communicated to the Council. And as most of you know, we've been going through this process for a while. It's not within the city's regulation or jurisdiction to address billboards, nor is it within OLCC's. It's not contemplated here, and so while I understand that that's a sensitive issue, it's really not what we're talking about here today. So I'd just like to acknowledge and point that out. With regards to a point that was brought up here today, that no one else is interested in coming to Tualatin, I can assure you that the case is patently the opposite. Western Oregon, the team with which I have worked, has for a number of years now, almost 2 years, been working with the city, and I would agree with you that there's only one team that's invested the amount of time to really try to address this, because Western Oregon would like to join this community for all the reasons that this community has engaged and brought about wonderful change. Is one of the many reasons why Western Oregon would like to be here. We're not asking for special treatment as an organization. We're simply, as an organization, trying to make the first step to bring an opportunity to create some change here in the city that's reasonable, that's kind of reflects the current attitude both of the city and the state and the lessons that have been learned over the last few years. With regards to asking for more feedback, it's never, I mean, this entire process has been, for 2 years, been about seeking feedback. I appreciate that the city is in the process of moving this forward. We would like to stay involved and like to keep this on a reasonable time frame, and we'll continue to be involved here, trying to provide a thoughtful business approach that ultimately engenders a positive result on the finances and what we believe will be the community in general. There was a point that I believe it was Councilor Brooks that talked about you guys are leaders. And while you do reflect the sentiments of the communities, part of that process is leadership and taking a stand. Not that you have to take a stand and face into a 30-knot wind, but you take a stand to reflect that this is an opportunity we have to propose a change. And then you deal with what the community response is to that change. If we're always sitting around and we vacillate, it's part of the process to discuss, but eventually leaders must shift to the next stage of, in this case, legislative development. Is taking the next step, taking a stand, and standing up for what you believe is representative of what the community wants and what you believe your constituents want. With regard to limiting access, minor decoys for the last year and a half have continued to show that the rate for marijuana businesses as opposed to alcohol are far better. 90+%, 95%. We have the issue, in comparison to alcohol in this state, if you take a look at OLCC's liquor violations versus alcohol violations, it's now 1 or 2 per email from OLCC, occasionally a couple more, but if you look at the list of violations from alcohol, ad nauseum, it repeats. Selling to a minor, staying open too late, selling packaged liquor when you don't have a license. Marijuana in this state is regulated so strictly that The people who are the worst operators, if they haven't been weeded out of the industry already, they are on their way out. There was a $110,000 fine just the other day for 2 violations for one of the largest operators, one of the biggest heavyweights as far as politics go in this state, and they were on the verge of having to lose their license and took a $110,000 fine. It's very serious. As a professional, as a community member, not this community, but another very similarly situated community, I wouldn't want an individual or a company that couldn't adhere to those strict standards. And I know personally and professionally that Western Oregon has never had such an issue. If I could ask the council for just a few seconds more. While we're in the process of looking at these buffers, I really appreciate the thoughtfulness. The team, Aquila and the planning manager, have done a great job, and I think that GIS tool is wonderful. But while we're here, we have been, as I mentioned last time, in the process of looking at 2 things, both the buffers as well as the underlying zoning requirements for areas that are reasonably associated with retail activities. Councilor Kellogg specifically mentioned today that there are industrial versions of licenses and there is a retail operation. I think while we're here addressing all these, it makes sense to deal with it all. Have some definitions for each type of licenses, and perhaps where the community sees reasonable, there might be an opportunity to have a retail in a retail facility, a general commercial facility or zoned area. Appreciate your time. Thank you, as always. I look forward to the continuing discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to come up and chat with council on about something that's not on the agenda? All right. That moves us on to the consent agenda. Those items on the consent agenda are considered routine and will be adopted by one motion unless someone on the council, excuse me, would like one of them removed and heard separately later tonight. Tonight, the consent agenda consists of one item, consideration of approval of the new liquor license application for 60s Cafe and Diner. Having reviewed the consent agenda, does anyone want it pulled off the consent agenda and heard separately?
Yes.
All right, we'll do that. Special reports, Tualatin moving forward, quarterly update.
After you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Jeff Fox, Public Works Director,
Megan George, Assistant to the City Manager.
and we will try and speak into the microphone tonight. So tonight we are here, it seems like we were just here to talk about the Tualatin Moving Forward bond program, but to give a quarterly update. I think the last time we were here was in October. So tonight, our quarterly update, we'll talk about the progress we made over the last year and a half or so, provide project updates on 4 significant projects, talk through a program timeline, talk about what's next, and then talk about the Tualatin Moving Forward website, and Megan will walk you through the website.
Yeah. And if I may really quickly, so the items that you have in front of you, the first is the second annual report. That's what we passed out in October. Stuffed inside is an updated version of the scorecard. We try to update that on a quarterly basis, so this has just been updated. And then a report that was provided as part of the quarterly update that's been made available on the website.
Cool. And so, since we're talking about it, on the scorecard, what's really cool is you start to see this left column filled in. You start to see a lot more dots. So there's a lot more activity going. And then if you flip it over to the backside, these are the neighborhood safety projects that council approved earlier this year, late last summer. So progress. So we have 5 projects built. Those are kind of the 5 right out of the chute, easy projects to get done. We have 15 projects right now that are in design and planning. So those are roaring along. We have a large design team made up of 4 engineering firms, all working hard to get these done. We've had 26 public meetings, and so we were looking at, just ask the question, how many times we've been out talking to the public specifically about the project? And those are either public meetings, kitchen table meetings, face-to-face meetings whenever we're near somebody's home, like Dogwood and Graham's Ferry. So just all of that interaction with folks that are involved in the projects and nearby the projects. We have 163 people on our mailing list, on our email list, that have asked to get specific updates about specific projects that are near their homes or businesses or areas that they want to learn more about. And then because we are trying to move these projects forward quickly this year, we've pre-ordered some of the driver feedback signs. So it's kind of a technical detail, but it's our way to essentially save about 2 months out of a construction schedule. So by having some of the equipment pre-ordered and sitting in our shop out at Public Works, when we get the contractors on board, they can come and pick up the equipment, and we save about 2 months out of each one of the project schedules.
Can you say that part again? That was very,
So we were trying to think of how we could save time. So a lot of the time that gets spent on these projects, once you hire a contractor, is in ordering equipment. So the rapid flashing beacons, they take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to come in once we order them. So if we were to get a contractor on board, order the equipment, and then let them start construction, it would be up to 8 weeks after we award the contract to them. So we go ahead and purchase some of the equipment and set it in the shop out at the yard, out at Public Works. And whenever the contractors get hired, they can just come and pick that up. And so it saves about 8 weeks.
I think that's fantastic.
So it was a way to help speed things up a bit. So again, the project report card. So one of the things that we're doing as we get closer to projects where we start to feel really comfortable with the construction cost, we update the cost on here. So one of the costs that was updated, because in this case the project is done, is Boones Ferry Road and Siletz. So that original cost estimate was $426,000. Now that it's all done, it cost us about $297,000. And so that, as we go through, I think we refer to it as kind of the Jeff factor in some of our estimates. I put sometimes, just depending on how confident I was, a huge contingency on some of these projects to make sure that as we move through this, we can actually get them done for what we said we could. So no promises that that'll happen every time, but hopefully it happens most of the time. I know, totally. Thus, no promises. So the first project update, this is an important project that we've talked about a bunch of times with council. So Tualatin Sherwood Road, Martinazzi to I-5. So we wanted to talk about this, and again, right now, again, we're showing fall 2021. I think at one point we thought we might be able to accelerate the project. The important thing to note on this is we don't own Tualatin Sherwood Road. So portion of it to the west is owned by Washington County, and then a portion to the east is owned by ODOT. It turns out we're within a quarter mile of ODOT's interchange, and so one of the things they have asked us to do is to evaluate impacts of this project on their interchange. And so it sounds kind of funny when we're talking about reducing congestion, but what ODOT's concerned about is as we reduce congestion and save travel time on Tualatin Sherwood Road, what does that do to mainline I-5 and what does that do to the interchange? So we're basically letting people get on the freeway faster, and that's a potential challenge. So we're working with ODOT right now on our traffic analysis to answer their questions. And then, as always, we continue to work with Washington County. We have a great working relationship. So Martinazzi Avenue and Staggert. So this is another really good news story. So this is a traffic signal at Martinazzi and Staggert to essentially replace the confusing four-way stop that we have there now. It'll act as a keystone cop, essentially telling people when they can go and when they can't go. So it'll include new sidewalks, crosswalks, ADA improvements, and bike lanes to improve safety. We spent a fair bit of time getting to 30% design, really trying to figure out where we were. And so one of the things that we did is we started out, the initial cost was right up against our cost estimate. It would seem like a much bigger project than we were hoping for. So we worked with the design team, kind of had some back and forth conversations. Finally reached out. One of the challenges on these hilly intersections is ADA and how you get across the crosswalk and keeping the slopes right. And so we had some interpretations that I think several of us on the team had differing opinions. So from my time in Bend, there's a board called the Access Board in Washington, D.C., and they essentially interpret ADA code. And so in Bend, we used to call them all the time because we were under a consent decree to do about $14 million worth of work, and so we always called them to ask questions. So on this project, we did the same thing, got a different interpretation of how to do crosswalks than what some of us on the team were thinking. And the end result is it'll save us about $500,000 to $1 million below where we thought we'd be at $2.4 million. So really good news story. It means the intersection will be compliant with ADA. We can get the signal in there that we want to get in there, and we don't have to spend $2.5 million to do it. So pretty good news story. Yes.
Does the Access Board work with other things as well? Not just streets, but
Yes.
like parks?
Right, all ADA. Yep.
Okay.
And they were they have a monthly webinar and stuff, but they're a super useful organization and just a sounding board.
Great, thank
So
you.
code is hard to understand, so they are really helpful. Mohawk Road at PGE, so this is another really cool story. So that's my dog Uma. So she's on our website. So
Yeah, we'll show her.
yeah, and so yeah, she's super neglected. So not spoiled at all. So this project was the one we talked about with PGE a while ago. We built a crosswalk and curb ramps that they paid for. We did the engineering internally. We came back on the neighborhood traffic safety projects. This is one of the ones, if we add RFBs, it completes that project. So it's one of the ones that we brought to council last year. And that one should be constructed this spring. So we're cruising along on that one. And that's one of the projects we've ordered rapid flashing beacons for. So as soon as they come in, we'll get the contractor out there and get them installed. So. And then the last update, Graham's Ferry at Dogwood. So this is another project that's going a little slower than we wanted to, largely because we don't own Graham's Ferry Road. And so it turns out whenever we don't own a road, it takes a little bit longer than we were hoping it would take. This one we're working with Washington County. We have a super good relationship with them. We're essentially going through their review process and trying to figure out if there's an easier way to streamline the process and an easier way to inspect construction once we're doing construction. So a word about the 90% design phase. Plans are at Washington County right now, and we are, as they review these, we're working with them to find out if there's an easier way for us to do this, just all the projects. So 65th by the high school, or by the hospital, is another project that is on a Washington County road, and so if we can get it sorted out in this one, it'll really help that project as well.
As you can see, we have an UMA campaign.
Yes. UMA is everywhere. And fortunately, she can sit and stay and not run out in the street, so that's sort of a significant qualification. Yeah, you're right, yeah, she does not yet.
That's phase 2.
Graham's
Yes.
Ferry at Dogwood, where is that as compared to like Kalania's on that road?
It is 1 block north of Cottonwood, and it is 1 block south of a road that starts with a K. My mind just went blank. But as you come down the curve, the very first street is, I forget what it is, and the next street is Dogwood.
Okay.
And then there's Cottonwood, and then there's Lodgepole, and then there's
Oh,
Kalania's.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. There's a
So
need
it's kind of
there.
right in the middle. That road was, we worked on this, Councilor Kellogg and I, when we were, Robert and Paul, worked on this for the county back
Right.
2015.
Yeah, a while. So soon, we should be, this spring, we should have this one finished. So timeline, so we thought that one of the easiest ways to just generally show where we are on the project or program is just kind of show all the projects that are going to be built in 2020 and 2021. And so I counted these earlier. You can see all the blue projects towards the bottom are neighborhood safety projects. So those are all going to be done this spring, early summer. And then Dogwood Graham's Ferry is this spring. Boone's Ferry at the high school is this summer. And then the others that are on there, the other 5, are all scheduled to be constructed next summer. And so, but they're in full-on design right now and permitting and working our way through.
Quick question on the high school.
Yes.
Just, sorry. One quick question on the high school. If you could remember to touch base with the high school, they are completely repaving that parking lot this summer, and so you may not, you might want to try to time it so you're not all there at the same time.
Right.
However
and,
that works.
And we're also doing a big overlay on Boone's Ferry. And so we're also trying to time this with the overlay. So, so that's one of the things we're trying to do to be more efficient is combine projects when we can. So
Jeff, The
Yes.
project on Martin Assey and Sagard, that's a signal light, right?
Yes.
Is that the big signal light, or is it just because there's some big ones and little ones?
Big regular traffic
The
signal,
trips,
red
okay.
lights, green lights, yellow lights, yes.
Can't wait to see that.
Yes, I know, that'll be really,
That's
it'll
like-
really help a lot.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. So there's quite a bit of things coming up next. You've heard about some of these already, so I won't spend too much time on them. One, of course, is the sidewalk art contest. So we're currently about halfway through our solicitation period, and we are desperate for entries. So if any of you like to do art on the side, any of your friends, any of your kids, your neighbors, please encourage them to submit their artwork for the program. Again, we're going to be collecting a bunch of different stuff for projects over the next couple of years.
We did hear just this
Yeah.
last week from the school
Oh.
that they're putting
Mhm.
it in all they're sending it out to all the schools,
Yeah.
kids, so.
Yeah, it's been a great partnership. Mm-hmm.
And then how do people submit?
So I will, on the last slide I've got for you, I'm going to go to the website and I'll show you where you can submit it. But we have a couple of options. You can either send it to me via email, you can mail it to city offices, you can also drop it by the library. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible. Definitely. So the next thing that's coming up is the call for projects. So you see the two green buttons that we've got there, and I'll show you them on the website as well. But we always solicit projects for the ongoing throughout the program. And we tend to get, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 a week on average for a range of projects across the city. We will, however, be doing a big push starting in April, and we're looking to put together a larger list of project suggestions. Of course, nonstop construction is coming up. So you saw Jeff's list of projects with estimates for when they'll be completed. But while the construction is happening, we will continue with our public engagement campaign, both for projects specifically and for larger bond program issues. So one of the things we will be engaging the public with and about is the fact that there will be construction happening, and to prepare and build in extra time into your routes and get excited. And we may have ribbon cutting events and stuff like that. So those are all things that are coming up simultaneous to the public engagement, project design, and permitting. Next slide. All right, so this is the sidewalk art contest. You've seen this all before. We do have a two-sided form in Spanish and English. So if there are those who prefer to submit and receive those informations in Spanish, we'd really like to make that as accessible as possible. You can go to the next slide. So these are so far we've received 61 project suggestions from across the city. The dots represent the locations of each of those project suggestions. In some cases, we've received multiple suggestions for the same dot. We did not decide to make those dots any larger because you miss some when you start to see it that way. But we're hoping that the map will continue to fill up. One of the things that the project team has worked on is mapping out where the project suggestions are coming from, in addition to where the project's locations actually are, to see if there are areas of the city where we're missing folks who are choosing not to participate for whatever reason. But one of the topics that we'll spend a lot more time on in the next couple of weeks is how to solicit project suggestions from a larger portion of the community. And they can do that both using paper forms, which we'll have available at various events coming up, but then also through the website itself. All right, so this is the website, and Jeff, if you actually want to click out and then go into, it should already be loaded on Chrome. There we go. So if you don't mind, I think I'm going to drive. So there's, how many of you have visited the website before? Okay, good, all of you, everybody. Check in on it daily. So just a couple things I wanted to point out to you. So the first is, if you scroll down slightly, you'll see the Suggest a Project button right here. So this is what you click. That will take you to fill in a form online. We ask for a couple of pieces of information, mostly so that we can get in touch with you to find out more information about what you're submitting. So that's the purpose of asking for your name, your contact information, and your address. And we'll go back up here. So another thing is at the very top, this orange bars, you can translate the page into Spanish. Some of the translations are a little bit clunky, but for the most part, it's been pretty okay. So we're looking at ways to improve some of those translations and then also make it more accessible. So that's one of the things we'll be working on in the next few weeks. You'll notice the paw print, of course. If you click on that.
It is life size.
It is life size.
Yeah.
Well, let's see.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Here we go. Come on. Well, so if it were working, this is what it takes you to essentially. So this is the UMA section of the website. So it's on the homepage, you just scroll down, but we've got the art contest information, and we're also starting to track UMA at different projects to try to make it a little bit more exciting for people to follow what's going on. As we learned, I think several weeks ago during the polling presentation, like 65% of Tualatin homeowners have dogs, something like that. So trying to play off of that as much as possible. Last thing I wanted to show you on the website before we move on is this projects button. So if you click on the priority projects, it'll pull up the map itself. And then if you click on the icons themselves, it'll show you a little bit of a description of each of the projects, including a button to learn more. So we'll be updating this to include the neighborhood safety projects, I believe. So it'll look a little bit more busy, and as we start to progress, we'll include more built stickers and all of that. But this is a great, quick location to go if you're trying to give a comprehensive, this is where the bond program is reaching out and all that. And with that, are there any questions? Yeah?
We're bad with the buttons tonight. I was just going to suggest, and I know you have time constraints, but maybe that since you need more people to enter the sidewalk contest, maybe post that on the CIO things.
Oh yeah, on their web pages?
Yeah.
Or Nextdoor?
Or Nextdoor, I'm sorry.
Nextdoor.
Nextdoor, because there's a lot of viewership of that throughout the community, and I can't imagine we don't have a lot of artistic people in this community.
Yeah, we have posted it on the city's Nextdoor profile. We don't have access to the neighbor, to the specifics, but we are presenting on Wednesday of this week to the CIO Presidents Group to talk about the bond program as a whole. And I'll make sure to highlight that and ask that they share the message that way as well.
And we as residents, if we have a page or like an account with Nextdoor, we can post that and it's for free for us. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then I just wonder too, do you do the Facebook?
Yeah, we've posted it on our Facebook page, on Instagram. Actually, I believe the most popular post was on Instagram, which surprised me. But
People are using it. I haven't gotten there yet, but I'll repost it on Facebook.
I'll make sure. I'll post it again sometime this week, so you'll see it when you scroll to the page. Great.
Is that it? Okay. Questions?
Thank you. Jeff, I think this one's for you. When we originally looked at straightening the intersection between Fred Meyer's and Cabela's, it was supposedly an expensive fix for a simple problem, which was you were going to save, I think it was 10 seconds per cycle. But the comment at the time, and the comment that really stuck with me because I'm aware of the problem, was you had, and you may not have stated this, you may have alluded to it. I'm not putting your words in your mouth. I'm not trying to play blame here. I'm trying to get up in a very long way. I'm getting to my question. What's being done to address the traffic flow off the I-5 freeway going southbound at Nyberg? Because that straightening of the intersection was supposed to help correct that flow by allowing more traffic to go through. So is there any discussion on now what that plan B would be to alleviate that problem? Because on some days it's an accident waiting to happen because they're stopped out onto the freeway. It's backed up so far.
Yep. Right. So I don't have an answer for you tonight. What I can say is that one of the things ODOT asked us to look at is that movement on the interchange, and so our initial traffic analysis before we'd spoken with ODOT didn't include analysis of the interchange, and so they've asked us to go back and look at overall how the interchange functions relative to our project. With that said, we don't have a tremendous amount of money to do things on their facility, and we would, we could go back and look at our signal again, and we can go back and look at the traffic report that we did for that signal. But I don't think there's a ton we can do given the volume of traffic that comes through there. But I would need to go back and look, and so we can get that answer.
Originally, straightening that intersection out was going to help alleviate the off-ramp, according to somebody at some presentation 2 years ago. And I understand all that changes. And I took from your comment to mean working with ODOT on the eastbound Nyberg going on to the southbound 5 and what that flow would anticipate, because you're really not doing anything to the westbound lanes.
Right. They've still asked us to look at the whole
Okay,
intersection.
and I'd appreciate if you could look at that, because that is that is a concern. I mean, and it is part of Tualatin, and it's certainly on our reputation as it is that, there's this huge problem exiting that freeway. The second question that I have is, you mentioned how you love the one handout, but I love this one with the little green blocks, the built. I found that to be like just opening that up and all the little hard hats of the stuff that's under construction. But this is probably a question for our city manager. We used to occasionally have the ability to mail stuff out because we mailed our monthly newsletter, but we don't do that anymore. Is there any mechanisms? Because this is the kind of thing, I mean, it's so simple, and yet it's so, and getting back to our comment about Nextdoor and all the negative comments that were posted on there about how we're not doing anything, when in fact, there's a lot going on here. And if there was, I'll leave that up to you guys.
Yeah, let us put our heads together on it. We've got a meeting in the morning to talk about it. The thing that first comes to mind is stuffing Tualatin Life.
That too. Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, whatever mechanism. I know, and maybe it's something that needs to be addressed, because I know it was a great idea to move to all digital, but there's still a lot of folks that aren't digital, as evidenced by Nextdoor, which ironically is digital. So, and then the other comment is, if I'm not mistaken, I don't believe the city has 65% dog owners. I believe it was of those polled.
Of those polled.
Just a point of clarification, because I know we have a dog and a couple of our neighbors have a dog, but I don't think 65% of our neighbors have a dog. But maybe, I don't know.
But I think it was statistically valid. So like, I think it was more in like the 45% range. Yeah, but I took that as statistically valid.
Okay. Interesting. I have no idea. I just thought that was interesting. All right.
90% of dog owners.
And then again, I can't say enough, Jeff, to you, and now to you, Megan, coming on board and working on this. This has been a labor of love for a lot of people for a long, long time. And there are so many projects in here that have so many different, Garden Corner Curves comes to mind, the crosswalk, Grand Ferry, which is, myself, I wasn't involved, I supported Garden Corner Curves, but that certainly was Julie and Robert. And then now to see it all kind of come together is just, it's really exciting, and I love the transparency that you're giving to the whole endeavor.
Thanks. Other questions, comments? Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we move on to general business, I believe. So item 1 under general business is consideration of resolution number 5483-20 to adopt the 2021 to 2025 capital improvement plan. Yep. Jeff and Kelsey, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor and Councilors. I'm Kelsey Lewis, Management Analyst in Public Works.
Jeff Fox, Public Works Director.
And we are here tonight to talk with you about the capital improvement plan and also to suggest that you adopt it. So the first thing we wanted to do is just kind of go through what we're going to talk about. We're here to ask you to adopt the capital improvement plan for this year. I'm going to go over what the plan is, just very briefly, why we do this planning process, how to find projects in this document, and then just highlight the first year of projects. Oops. So first of all, what is this document? It is a fluid planning document to help us identify and prioritize the funding for our big projects. So those are things like new infrastructure, large maintenance projects, master planning projects, vehicles, equipment, and new technology. And there are all kinds of projects throughout the city that we look at. The reason we do this, a good example of coordinating projects, Jeff was just talking about, as part of the bond program, coordinating projects so that we don't, the typical example would be to do a water line project before you do a road on top of right? So you don't have to rip it up to do the project and then make your road surface not as well. So the capital improvement plan highlights projects that might interact with each other and helps us plan to coordinate those better. Another reason is to plan for rate adjustments. So it helps us understand when we have a large number of projects happening at the same time that might make us look at whether a rate is sustainable. Another is to create a fast approved list of grants. There are many, many grant programs out there that require some sort of approved, adopted list that's approved by the council of projects. So it's helpful for us when we're planning for grant opportunities. And it is also one of those nitty-gritty things that we need to do for SDC funding. That's system development charge. So when developments come in and they need to pay for putting in more infrastructure in the city, this list of projects here gives us authorization to spend that money. And then it also helps us overall prioritize limited funding. This is particularly true in our general fund, which is a very, as you know, constrained resource. So we look at that pretty closely. I keep touching it. Gotta stop doing that. All right. So I wanted to go into briefly how the document is arranged. It starts out with a brief executive summary, and in there it shows all of the projects that are in this plan, which is a 5-year plan, and it shows them first by category, which we break up into 5 categories, and they're listed up here: facilities and equipment, parks and recreation, technology, transportation, and utilities. So you can find all of the projects that are in this plan listed under those categories, or if you are looking for a specific funding source, it's also arranged that way. So right after all of the project listed by category is by the funding source. So if you want to know all of the things that are in the building fund, you can find those. It's not super exciting at the moment, it's just vehicles. That can be helpful if there's a particular one you want to look at. A good example right now would be the bond fund. That's for the Tualatin Moving Forward Transportation Bond. So you can look at all of those projects separately from all transportation projects, for example. And then after those listing of the projects, there's a page for each project. So each project has a 1-page summary of what the project is, how it's funded, what's the time frame that we anticipate the project happening, its scope, any history or background information about it, and then there's a map if a map is relevant. We don't have maps for things like vehicles because there's no specific location. But sometimes that can help. The map can get you oriented towards where the project is going to happen, which can be particularly helpful for those projects like water quality facilities that none of us really know are there. So it's nice to have that map. And then if you're looking for a project that you feel like should be in this plan, it might be in the back under unfunded, what we call the unfunded section. And those are projects that we're aware of. It's okay. So the unfunded projects are ones that we are aware of that just don't fit into the next 5 years. So they might be something that is absolutely planned to happen, but it's a little farther out. Or something, for example, that first thing on the top of the list, it's a possibility, but not something we're currently considering in the next 5 years. So we list all of those things in the back, and they're listed by category to make it a little easier to find them. So there are a number of things in there. They can be things from master plans that look at a longer time period, but we just don't have it categorized into the next 5 years. Or it could be a project that we have heard from the community is really important. We have not figured out how to fund it yet, but we want to acknowledge that it is important, and so it's included in the back section. So then, does anyone have any questions before we go? Please.
It's kind of a detailed one. Well, on the project summary by funding source, when I look out to the 24-25 year, one big thing is the SDCs for parks goes up to 20 million, and another one, I think the sewer. Is that because of expected growth in Basalt Creek?
That's a great question. I don't know. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
And then my other question
I
was
can
on
answer that for you.
the general fund goes from just over 8 million to almost 16 million between 23-24 and 24-25. So
Yep.
I'm wondering where that revenue comes from.
So those are not identified revenues in the general
Okay.
fund. That just tells us what projects we would like to have during that period of time, and then we have to
Okay.
prioritize when it comes to the year. You're absolutely
gotcha.
correct that there are more things in our general fund that we would like to do than that we have funding for.
Okay, I thought maybe we had some magic way we were doubling our monies.
That would be cool.
That'd be awesome.
No, but I'll look at the parks question and get back to you on that one.
I have a follow-up question on that. So, because I had a question I was going to ask later about unfunded versus funded, but we don't have funds for what's in your funded list right now. So how do you decide what is unfunded in the back and what is funded up front?
That is a great question. So there.
Don't tell me that's a great question.
No,
I've asked
no, it is a great question. There are a couple of reasons for that. So some of the things are projects that we are looking for grant funding in a particular cycle for. So it could be something, you're right, we absolutely don't have funding for, but we know that there's a grant cycle and we want to keep track of that. Sometimes, well, oftentimes funding grant cycles they feel very slow. We know they're coming, but it takes a long time to, say, go from the letter of interest stage to the applying for the money to competing for the money to actually receiving the money. So we're trying to keep track of when those phases are. So there are some projects that are that you see in the plan in maybe year 4 of this 5-year plan, because we're thinking, okay, that's when we're going to apply. That's when we think the funding would actually come in. And it's not yet secured. There are other projects that are in there because we know realistically that's the time frame when, say, something is going to break, or that's when we think it's going to break, and we want to keep track of that realistically, even though we might not have an identified funding source at this point. There are a number of other reasons why there are things in there, but those are a few of the reasons.
Sorry. I'm having Valerie problems with my speaker. So just a follow-up question then, because to me, and again, this is just, I'm not experienced with it, but some of the unfunded projects appear to be very similar to the projects on transportation. And so wouldn't they also then be available, if they're on the unfunded list, be available for some kind of a grant that may pop up? Or so how do you make that distinction?
Mostly we would put something on the list if we know of a specific grant. There could be grant programs all over the place, but we have a limited amount of time and staffing to apply for grants and administer grants, so that's
Right.
part of the reason.
And part of the reason too is, if you remember last year, that we were looking at a 10-year CIP. And so a bunch of the unfunded projects were in that second 5 years. That ended up being really difficult to manage. And so we went back to a 5-year CIP. I mean, I'm not sure how realistic it was as we got out to 10 years anyway, that we could really predict what our revenue streams would be and what projects we could really do during those years. So by going back to 5 years, a lot of those projects that were in that outer 5 years slipped off into the unfunded list, so we keep track of them.
So one last follow-up question, and then I'll let you move on. So then specifically then, would a project, and I'm specifically looking on the unfunded for Helenas Road from 109th to Graham's Ferry, as an example, because that's my neighborhood. Okay. And so if development went in there, then there would be SDCs that would pay for that improvement, and then that would automatically move into the funded, or would that just not necessarily, because those SDCs don't have to, I mean, I get they don't have to use that specific street, they could be used for Tualatin Road, for example.
Right. So that's where, when Kelsey was saying this is a fluid planning document,
okay.
It truly is a fluid planning document. It's not our budgeting tool. It helps us understand what we think is coming up in the future, so we can plan for it and make sure we're not doing other projects to conflict. So it really is that fluid document. So.
And if you look at the document year over year, you will find that things move back and forth from the unfunded list to the funded list and back again, just depending on opportunities we think are coming, or sometimes these things are based, for example, in transportation, based on new traffic situations that we didn't know about, maybe even 6 months ago. Something has changed, and so something becomes a different kind of a priority. So it is definitely fluid. It moves around a lot, and we try to keep up with the opportunities we're aware of. So I'm going to go ahead and go over a few of the projects that are, well, all of the projects that are listed in our first year of this 5-year CIP by category. I don't need to read them all out to you, but I certainly can. So these are I think I skipped forward, yeah. The facilities and equipment projects. There's library furnishing replacement. This is, I believe, the 4th phase of the library furnishing. So each year they go through and change out some of the furniture in the library. This one's the 4th one, and I believe they are children's area and lobby. We also have some vehicles, which are in parks maintenance and police. In the parks and recreation area, at Folliday Park Sports Court, Ice Age Tonkin Trail easements, if we can get those easements. Jurgens Park Playground, Kia Cuts Bridge repairs, and Stone Ridge Park design. So those are all projects we're looking at.
Yeah, can you hold there for just a moment?
Yes.
So, and it would be better if Ross was here, but we had a presentation at our advance about 2 items in the parks that were critical.
Yes.
There's a bridge at Browns Ferry Park that's closed, and then the community center and the steps and those things. I don't see those anywhere on the plan.
The Browns Ferry Bridge is a year out. That's it's in 21-22. So it is in the plan. It's not in this first year. We did prioritize all of those projects that are in the general fund. That, of course, really constrained general fund. There were a number of things on that list. Browns Ferry was definitely considered, and one of the things we wanted to fund. We just simply didn't have enough money in this year. So it's currently the 3rd alternate. If we have enough funding, that would be the 3rd thing to get funded. So it's absolutely constrained. When we're looking at all these things, there are many, many things that we want to fund, and there are only a few that actually do get funded in every year out of the general fund. So it's on the list. It is in the CIP. Typically, when we're going through this process of the general fund prioritization for staff, we have in any budgeting sort of planning process, right? You only have the information available to you that is available at that moment. When we get closer to our annual budgeting process and Dawn has a better idea of how much money, revenues exactly we have, we'll have a more fine-tuned look at that. And that's why we create a list of alternates, so that if it turns out we have more funding available, then we look at funding those things. So that's where it is right now. Yeah. So those are the Parks and Recreation projects that are up. Transportation, many of these are in the bond fund, the Tualatin Moving Forward Bond Fund program. So 65th in the hospital, 95th. There are many, many there. Garden Corner Curves you'll see there. Herman Road is one of the ones that is not bond funded. That is through a Metro grant. So we're just beginning the process of starting design for Herman Road. And yeah, I think all of those, except for the TSP, are all in the bond program. So they're all underway, the projects that Jeff and Megan were just talking about. For utility projects, those are the ones that are up. A few sewer projects, 65th and Nyberg Trunk, North Martin Nancy Trunk, so those are in residential areas. A few stormwater ponds and a water line and reservoir coatings. So we're getting work done there, planning to do that work. So all of this CIP, the reason that we do the planning process, I talked about a little bit before, but how it works with our budget is that we do this process first before the annual budget process. This is intended to be finished and approved before we propose our budget, so that this process really feeds into our annual budgeting process. So We've already talked about the projects that we think we might want to do. And then when we're talking about annual budgeting, that happens right after this process. So this kind of helps set us up so that we're ready for the annual budget process. Does anyone have any questions? More questions?
Questions?
No. I just want to say thank you. It seems like a very good tool. And anytime that efficiency and effectiveness is built into management, it's such a value, especially when we're dealing with such tight funds, public trust, and grant cycles, which is its own beast. So I just really appreciate the thoughtfulness, especially around coordinating projects and then helping us understand, you know, I just think like your point about the bridge is a very important point where there's a real need, and so we can see where these things are, and it helps us to also weigh our decisions about other things with a document that's a little bit different than a straight up budget. So I can understand it from your perspective with planning, but also for our perspective with policy decisions, it's a really helpful tool as well. So I appreciate all the work. Thanks.
Other comments? Robert?
Yeah, just a food for thought piece. This is a document I've seen several years in a row now, and it's always forward-looking. But I never seem to understand what happened in the year before or the year before that about the things that we spent money on, things, and not just for record purposes, but to celebrate those things. And so maybe in the next iteration of this, go back a couple of years and say these are the projects that were funded either through these funds or under this category, so that we can see where we've been and where we've spent some money and where future money is being planned to be spent.
Thanks.
Paul?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I have a few questions. Actually, I want to follow up on Councilor Kellogg's question because I was going to, I want to talk about the transportation system plan. I have some other questions related to your presentation, but I also want to talk about the transportation system plan. And I think that would be a great starting point to Councilor Kellogg's question, because that was done in 2014, and hopefully there's a lot of successes on there. I haven't looked at it in detail. What I have looked at is something that, you know, every 5 to 6 years is what I always remember. I've been corrected that it could be longer, but I remember that process. Again, I was part of the CIO, and it was a huge undertaking, but it was an important undertaking for the city because it really identified a lot of projects and kind of gave, I think, staff a new, an understanding of what you're doing right with respect to prioritizing, and oh, we missed that. We didn't realize there's that much support behind it. Or reverse, boy, we thought that was a priority and nobody cares. So one of the questions I have is, a long time ago, Jeff, you and Councilor Kellogg looked at the roadway in front of Donut Land, McDonald's, and I asked the question then, how do we get that on the transportation plan? How do we get that on the construction improvement plan? And so my question to you is, what is the process? Because it's not there, it's not on any list, and yet it certainly is something that in another 7 years, if we are fortunate enough to be able to still push a new bond, that would probably be my number one item right now, today. I mean, a lot of things change, but right now that'd be my number one item. And so and I get it, it's unfunded, it's ridiculously expensive, I understand all that, but there's a $17 million project on there, and so so that's my question. What process would we use to add, to get that into the list?
So I think the long answer, just on time frame, is it would be evaluated as part of the TSP update. I think the short answer is, when we were walking around out there that day, we talked a little bit about when we get to the end of the bond program, if we had money left over in the bond program, using that to seed a study to look at the intersection and kind of see what we could do. And so, I mean, we're still a little ways away from really doing that. Right now we have some ideas, but we've not done the engineering to sort of see
No,
if
no,
any of that works. And
And
so,
I'm not recommending it.
so
I
that's
just would
the-
like to see it on that unfunded list so that when the funds become available through whatever source, because I think it, to me, it's really important that if you're doing something, it's something that's been on the list, and something of that size should be on the list for a long time, and not just shock the whole community by saying, "Oh yeah, by the well, we've been talking about it. Don't worry about it. You know, trust me." I would really, so I'd like to see that on the list. And then the second, because and then I have a second reason for that whole process of getting on the list. There's been a lot of talk, although it's a discussion that really hasn't gone anywhere, on Grams Ferry Road at the curve up to Ibach Road, or Ibach Road and Grams Ferry down through the curve. The road's not standard. The sidewalk on the southbound side ends. I understand the one conversation, actually I've had multiple conversations, it's always the same story, is that that's the homeowner's responsibility, except we thought there was a solution when the housing development was going to go in there, because they were going to basically tear down 3 of those 4 houses. And so my feeling was, oh, they're going to then correct at least that portion of the roadway as part of their whole thing. And then I realized it's not on anybody's plan. It's nowhere. It's not on a list of things that need to be done, even though the north side of that was on a list for a long time. And actually, we ended up getting, I believe it was Washington County funding, Councilor Kellogg, correct? Yeah, for the sidewalk and the railing that went in to improve that. But they never improved the roadway, and that roadway is, it's taking a lot of traffic right now. That should go away when they extend Basalt Creek Parkway down to Boones Ferry. It should relieve, because there are a lot of cars that are coming up that road right now. But it is still, there's no changing. It's a narrow road. It's a very dangerous road when bicyclists are on it, because they can use the bike path on the southbound side, or westbound, depending on whatever way you're going. But as you go up towards Boones Ferry Road, that ends there, and you get bicycle riders who are on that roadway that's dangerous. So, and those are my 2 things. Are just and if it's the TSP, can you please start that tomorrow? And if it's some other form, then let me know what system, maybe through the CIO, land use officers, quarterly meeting or something, that some of those items, and maybe there's other items as well that are worthy of being on that unfunded list.
Sure. So Grams Ferry Road, County Road, we did, because we're doing a project out there, we checked with them this year to see what they were doing for a pavement overlay. So a sort of a parallel project on 65th, the county overlaid 65th last year, and they added a bike lane there, because whenever we overlay, it's a great opportunity to do new striping. So that might be an opportunity. They're not doing pavement overlay this year. It didn't make their list. It might make their list in 2021. It's a little bit out of our control, but we just checked because we're doing the Dogwood Grams Ferry project, and we wanted to see if we could coordinate that. And then I'll have to look at the sidewalk project. I'm not super familiar with it. What I can say is that there are several sections around town where we have, for whatever reason, short sections of sidewalk. 93rd Avenue over by the elementary school is one. There's maybe 2 lots that just don't have sidewalk, and so I would say that would be an awesome project to go to the website, or have staff go to the website, push the button, enter that as a suggested project, because if it's a few lots, it in all likelihood falls in that price range, and so. We're trying to encourage folks to do that on the bond program. If there's if it's just a couple of lots worth of sidewalk, that's probably less than $100,000. So it sort of fits that criteria. And then it would be measured relative to all the other project requests we get, and we'd bring that to council to make the final call.
Other questions? Just a quick one, easy one for your Jeff, being a former water guy. Is this interior coating or exterior coating in A1 and B2?
It is both.
Both.
So we did a cool thing this year.
All right.
So Kim McMillan, our city engineer, brought in a company that goes inside the reservoirs in a raft. So we used to drain the reservoirs, and it's a huge hassle to do condition assessment. Yeah. And this company called Ascent, they basically get inside the reservoirs in a raft, and they're all sanitized, and they go in there and they do condition assessment that way. And so we did that this year. We found out that we have a little bit more life than we thought we had, so we'll probably extend that out a little bit longer. But yeah, inside and outside. New technology, kind of a cool approach to trying to figure out what's going on inside those reservoirs. So.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Thank you. Well, I guess no. Now we have to discuss it and vote, don't we? Huh? This was just an informational thing.
Right.
Yes,
We were
please
just
do
talking.
adopt.
You were just engrossed into this.
Thank you for all your questions.
All right. So discussion. Any further questions for Kelsey or Jeff? Motions.
I have a motion to make. I move that we approve resolution number 5483-20 and adopt the 21 to 25 capital improvement plan.
I have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 5483-20 to adopt the 2021-2025 capital improvement plan. Any discussion on the motion? I gotta do a roll call. Yes, I'm finally getting it. All right, Paul.
Yes.
Valerie.
Yes.
Bridget.
Aye.
Robert.
Aye.
Maria.
Yes.
Nancy.
Aye.
And I vote yes also. Approved. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Council communications, this be, yep, that's after council communications. Yep, yep. Yep. All right, so council communications, we'll start with Robert this time.
Several things. First, I had the privilege of going to the police awards banquet last Saturday night, or 2 Saturday nights ago now, maybe. I don't know. It's been a while, but it was an excellent presentation. The video every year just keeps getting better, so thanks for the invitation and a great event. On Friday, just past Friday, I went to the City Club's presentation, which was Metro President Lynn Peterson offering her State of the County, well, not the official State of the County address, but was really an inspiring speech about all the things that Metro is doing, not only with respect to their efforts to combat homelessness, but what they're doing with the environment, the transportation bond. Just really excited, an inspirational performance. Now, a rather sad note. Some of you may have heard Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue, the captain over at the Tualatin Station number 34, is gravely ill. He is comatose, and everyone is pulling for him, but I would ask that, if you see somebody from TVNFR, just let them know that Captain Pearson and his family are in your thoughts. And because I don't want to end on a sad note, today, or actually, I'm sorry, well, it was today, this morning, very early this morning, I went back to look at some of our conversation, or hear some of our conversation on the previous marijuana debate, and I noted, and I don't know who's responsible for this, but our city website and the presentation of the video of the city council meetings is so vastly improved that you wouldn't even know it's the same website. There's a video, the agenda is right underneath it, it is wholly functional, so whoever's responsible for that.
Let's give Megan credit.
But extremely well done, so thank you for that.
Thank you. Maria.
Not much. We had our council committee advisory meeting last Monday, and it went well. We had some really great people that are joining our budget committee or reappointed for it, and then several other ones. We have a young, I'm just always amazed about everyone out there who wants to volunteer and be part of our committees, and it's always inspiring, and it makes me want to keep going and continue. So thank you all.
Paul.
Thank you. So a couple of things. The one thing I want to comment, I didn't want to comment because I don't want to set a new precedent of commenting on things that our speakers make a statement on, but one of the things that Mr. Stewart commented on was, again, he keeps hammering home this compliance with OLCC, and I happen to have some other comments here that I ended up not using in our presentation in the work session. But the Oregon Public Health Division recommended the legislature implement a comprehensive marijuana prevention and control program based on a best practice use of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And as of last December, the last session, the Oregon legislature has not enacted that. So I'm not sure why he keeps honing in on that, because there is no enforcement, and it is a huge concern. I know Councilor Kellogg said that we used to be in the Wild West, and now we know a lot, and my contention is we're still in the Wild West. We don't know anything. We're still learning. On a much better note, House Bill 4017 amendment was introduced by Rachel Pusak. It is in the legislature. I believe Sherilyn has a copy. If not, I can get you all a copy. It's really simple. She figured out how to get it into an existing bill. The comment I heard was she could not have done it without the speaker's help. And if the speaker gave her help, the other comment I heard was if the speaker's behind it, it's something that'll get done. That's the magic of Salem. Take that for what it's worth. What is very exciting is 14 of the 16 state representatives from Clackamas have supported and are in the process of co-signing on it. And one of them that's not on yet was Senator Wagner, who has been publicly in favor of that and publicly in favor of that funding it. So I'm anxious to see where he stands on that. The second, I was at the Washington coordinating meeting today that Mayor Bumack sits at. And he can certainly talk about more of the things that he discussed, but I was kind of surprised that Carmen Road is back to an at-grade crossing with Southwest Corridor. Wasn't something I expected to hear from them, and they basically said, yeah, this is the way it's going to be. So something to think about. There is a open house, Tualatin Elementary. I believe it's March 2nd. It's that Monday at 6 o'clock. I will be there. It's on my calendar. Others who want to participate certainly would welcome you to showing up. ODOT did a great tolling presentation to Washington, and it's tongue-in-cheek. I'm not in favor of tolling. They're doing the exact same presentation to the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee next month. They offered to do an update to council, and I'll leave that to Frank to talk individually to people, but certainly it would be nice to have them do the update here, because I have a lot of questions which I will be able to ask as a sitting member of the Clackamas Coordinating Committee. Frank asked 1 or 2 questions, as he is able to do sitting at that table. The rest of us kind of have to listen, but if we have them make a presentation, it would give us an opportunity. So if there's any desire to hear that, if there's any work, there's probably no room in our work session, because I've got 2 proposals that I'm pitching. But it would be nice to have it at our work session. The second thing that was discussed at the Clackamas Coordinating Council, there was a very interesting comment by the mayor of Sandy. They were specifically talking about the carbon tax bill that's before the House in Salem, before both the House and the Senate. The Senate has not yet walked out, so everyone is very hopeful. They've made a lot of compromises. And the comment that the Sandy mayor said was he was in a truck circling and then beeping horns because his father runs a trucking company and they're concerned. He said he also is working with their city council to work on a climate change plan because, in his words, it's coming. It might get delayed this year, but it's coming. And one of the things that's going to be required is a climate action plan. Now, the city of Milwaukee has one that took them, according to the city manager, and I'm not denying that, I'm just quoting her, was 2 years, I think you said, that very elaborate. And that's not surprising. Mayor Gama is quite the environmentalist. Lake Oswego has one that was put together pretty quickly. Clackamas County is offering to put something together for the cities, and I would suggest that as a city, I would love to see even if this session is not required, I'd love to see us get started on it. And it can be something simple, just like our goals are to reduce our carbon footprint and have our police department have 10% of their vehicles electric. Well, they can't be electric because that study bombed when the guy ran out of electricity chasing somebody. But whatever that is, whether it's electric cars or natural gas cars, whether it's city cars, in other words, and whatever our goals might be to reduce our carbon footprint. Because if the current plan calls for for funds to be available to cities, provided they have a plan that's been approved by what will be a brand new board, the Oregon Greenhouse Reduction Board. It's a mouthful for you. But there will be funding, and you're required to prepare an annual report and submit it to other cities. There's no agreement. You don't have to have other cities agree. There is some confusion whether or not metro cities would have to follow the metro guidelines. That's still open for debate. That's part of that bill, so stay tuned. For those of you who are interested, Tualatin Together meets the third Thursday of each month at the Historic Society building, and there is a free lunch. It's usually pretty decent. It's either Costco or Ali Hoyle makes something, and she's an amazing cook. So feel free. And also to staff, can I please get I know it's available, I just don't, I know you guys can put it together in 2 minutes. All the codes on those maps, you know, CO, with the breakdown for all the different manufacturing and all the different things. If we can just get that spelled out as we move forward and talk about the different codes, I would really, really appreciate it. And other than that, that's all I did this month.
A couple of follow-ups. If I heard you right, you were asking for an update about the tolling at the work session?
No, that could be.
Well,
Yeah, that was
This is a 2-year project. This isn't
so
something.
we have ODOT coming on March 23rd at the work session to give us an update on that project.
Is this,
Garrett lined them up.
is this Mandy?
I don't know. Garrett has worked on it. I can get who is coming. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, because it was Mandy who gave it this morning. So it was Mandy and the woman who said she would coordinate a time. If it's not the one that Paul and I saw today, her name is Heather Wills. She's a senior project manager. It looks like she's a contractor who works for them.
I do know that they're on their agenda. They're coming at 6 p.m. on March 23rd for the work session, so I can find out who's planning on coming.
And how much time did they allocate for that?
Probably 40 minutes.
I was going to say, because she got skewered this morning.
Right. Do you want them there or no? I mean,
Oh, heck
it's
yeah.
like, what are you asking?
That was one of the things I had on my list. Is that, just like Paul, I want to hear that. You want to see this presentation.
That's the same night Councilor Dirksen is also coming to give a Get Moving 2020 update at work session.
That was another skewering this morning. I got lots of good. Okay. Valerie.
Tune in on the 27th.
Yeah. They'll tune in a few minutes.
I also went to the police dinner. It was really a big reminder of how they're really our first responders before TVF&R can get there. And they said they had saved, I believe, 15 lives over last year. It was very amazing. The council appointments, I think we were all just so pleased with the people, even the people that we didn't select there. It's just so impressive, the volunteerism and the quality of people in our community. I went to the open house little thing for the not Vietnam, I keep doing that, Veterans Memorial, excuse me.
It's like the Scouts and the Boy Scouts.
You're right, or even now. And I was just really impressed with the input. I thought that might have been one of the best consulting teams I've ever seen. The big thing I wanted to ask about or talk about is we had discussed a letter in support of the library levy, and I think we're all in agreement. And I got some more information from Gerald Kubiak. He's with People for Libraries, and Councilor Kellogg's agreed to help me do a first draft that we could send to everybody to look at. But a couple things, everybody will need to sign a waiver form saying that they're in agreement with this, if you're in support of that. There is to put the letter in the voters pamphlet, which I think the due date's March 18th or something. There's a $400 fee, which if any of you have campaign funds, it can come out of that. Otherwise, it comes up to, I think, $57 a piece. So there's got to be a willingness to share that. Also, Gerald mentioned that in the past there's also a public safety levy. And in the past, Tualatin City Council has passed resolutions for both these, for the library and that. And I just wondered, I don't know if this is
Aren't
the
they
right
coming?
time.
Isn't the sheriff coming again, or?
Sheriff and the CCLS are coming on at an upcoming meeting.
Yeah. So maybe at that time.
You can bring it up then, yeah.
They're coming on the February, or the first meeting of March the
We'll
9th.
miss it. Yeah, we'll be gone. Yeah.
But we can still
We
have a proclamation.
Yeah.
We're gone.
All right. Is that it?
Sounds great.
All right. Bridget.
All right, you guys. Well, first of all, I'm going to be gone for two council meetings coming up, so take it in. No. And I too went to the police foundation. One of the statistics when they were talking about that the police bring out what do you call that? AED, where you get somebody's heart going again. That there's a program, because statistically it's shown that their survival rates go up like a huge percent when police come with that. So I guess we started at about 12%, I think, if I remember the numbers correctly, and now we have a 40% survival rate. The goal is to get up to 60%, and I don't know how long this program's been going, but it's a specific type of heart attack that people survive when the police are involved with first responders. So I found that really interesting and a really great presentation. I felt like I learned a lot. And there was a lot of other things that were great about celebrating all the officers' hard work and life-risking behavior. So we're just really grateful to our police department and leadership there. It was a really nice event. And it was my first time going too, so that was cool. Let's see. I just want to also say just reiterate what the other members of the council appointment committee, when we appoint our volunteers onto committees, we often wish we could appoint everybody. The level of people that come to volunteer is really phenomenal. We selected some wonderful people that represent a lot of the things that we talked about in our council advance around diversity goals, engaging young people, and other things that I feel really proud of. And I feel we have such a unified perspective oftentimes, the three of us that sit together. So it's really a pleasure to sit with Maria and Val. So yes, and her enthusiasm about the parks. The other thing I want to say is I went to the Water Consortium meeting, so that we passed the budget for this year, so you guys should know that. There is a little bit of an increase for our participation in the consortium. The price went up 0.8%, so it went up less than they anticipated, so that was really good. And the presentation that they presented was about actually the water source, the Willamette water source, their process of getting an EPA loan, which is at a very low rate, and it's anticipated that Portland will do the same for our water resource, which helps keep the rates down for us, which is, I know, something that was a concern for some people, and that concern is being partially alleviated. So that's a good news from there. The other thing I did was go to the State of the City address in Milwaukee, actually. And at the Council Advance, I brought, for some people, the Milwaukee environmental plan, climate plan, and we talked about that. So I'm in agreement with you, Paul. When I was at the State of the City, I spoke. I thanked them for their work. I spoke with one of the counselors there that I know, and she was very willing. Their Public Works Director is very willing to share information and collaborate with us. So I was excited about that. And I know Beaverton just passed one too, unanimously. So they're being passed all around us, and I hope that we will stay with the times. And let's see. So things that are coming up, just because I won't be here I do want to say that the PAB CDBG grant process will be beginning. I will be back, even though I won't be at council, I'll be back for that process, and we'll be working through on that on the 27th. And then I'll be in DC. I'm really looking forward to learning more. There's classes and things that help me be a better counselor, and have learning opportunities, have the opportunity to speak to our elected officials about things that are important to us. For instance, Senator Merkley was very responsible to help these coordinated, they're kind of like IGA for transportation, that now they transfer that to water. So he was able to help make it possible for multi-city projects to be funded for the EPA water project. So it's pretty incredible, and a huge project that brings billions and billions of dollars into our communities. And so I just want to give a shout out for that and say that I'm really excited about going, and I'm really glad that that the YAC kids are going as well. And then there's also, on the 7th of March, there's a planting event at Ibach City Park. So they're doing a volunteer planting. So if anybody wants to go to that, it'll be on March 7th, which is a Saturday. And I will try to be there. And what else is coming up before? And then the PAB will be again. And I think that's pretty much what I've got. I do want to also say there's another event that's not through our parks, that's through Portland Parks, which is a Parks Refugee event. Mayor Wheeler is going to be there. It's on March 19th. And I don't know that much about it, but I know that they have these occasionally, and it's an opportunity for people to meet and understand more about refugee community. There's food oftentimes, and it's a community event, so it might be something that people are interested in knowing about. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Nancy?
Well, let's see. Since our last council meeting, the one thing I can add that won't be a duplication is I just wanted to compliment staff and department heads and everyone that participated in the council advance. That it was 2 good days spent with good and interesting people that have the best interests of the city at heart, and it was fun and energizing talking about our future plans and our future goals for this year and beyond. And I thought it, as usual, was well planned by Sherilyn and staff, and was time well spent. So I appreciate that. And I look forward to getting our new presentation of our goals and
All right.
and
All
our
right.
accomplishments.
Yeah. All right. Like Nancy, I want to thank Sherilyn and staff for taking part of a Saturday and a Friday for the advance. I thought it was very well done. Jim Oswald did a terrific job as usual. Moved us along when we needed to be moved along, and very much appreciate his efforts. On the 28th of January, I attended Mayor Snyder's Tiger State of the City. He did a terrific job as usual, and I'm looking forward to doing a better job on May 14th with our morning show versus his night show. Attended the police banquet also. It was interesting. I did a post on the banquet, and that post got like 70 comments and likes. It was one of the most popular things I put up. All people being appreciative of the police and what they do and the life-saving things that the Tualatin Force is doing. So thanks again for doing that event. On the 5th, I met with Carrie Herricks, who is the new staff liaison for Washington County, Multnomah County for Senator Merkley. Discussed the needs that we have here in the city. One of the things that I want to follow up with her, do we get the grant listing from Senator Merkley's office of federal grants that are available to cities? I guess he publishes it. Yeah, I'm gonna follow up with her because she says he does have a list. Because I was mentioning about parks, and she goes, "Oh yeah, all that kind of stuff's in there." So it's all like these federal grants that might be obscure that we might be able to dig into. So I have her card. I can give you a copy of her card, and if you could reach out to her. It was a very good meeting. We talked about, like I said, transportation, growth here, Southwest Corridor, water, infrastructure, 5G preemption, the usual things we were very interested in. Of course, Senator Merkley's on board for all of them. Community development block grants. I've got an appointment with him. Hopefully, Secretary Pompeo doesn't pull him away like he did last time. With Senator Merkley on the Friday, I'm in D.C. coming up here in March. On the 6th of February, I attended the Clackamas Mayor's meeting along with Sherilyn, and quite the agenda that day. Kicked off with the Here Together Community Forum. The Washington County version of it is tonight. Clackamas County is having a separate one. Per Metro Council Juan Gonzalez, it will be on the ballot. It's a foregone conclusion. They're going to put it in the ballot. They're going to refer it from Metro on the May ballot. They're looking to raise $200 to $300 million a year. Metro foresees this being a payroll tax at 1%. On folks who make, for singles, 125 grand, or couples, 250 grand. So a high income, if you will, payroll tax. There's a movement afoot from Tina Kotek's office to give Metro permission to go to 2%. And the question I raised at that is that 2% for the Here Together, or is that 2% for anything Metro does in the future? That's to be seen. Chair Bernard then went on about Clackamas County's efforts for affordable housing. They're moving forward. They're looking actively reaching out for projects in Clackamas County. Looking at cities, even if you're on the edge, they will talk to you. Even if it's not in the UGB, Clackamas County will talk to them about funding housing initiatives. They're launching their own equity, diversity, and inclusion. They opened a new office with 3 folks. So they're getting serious about their DEI like we are in Clackamas County. As Paul mentioned, they're kicking off a climate county action plan. Their goal is to have 0 carbon emissions. They're hiring a consultant who will develop a plan to help them do that. They're addressing in unincorporated Clackamas County. Right now, they do not allow short-term rentals, but they're going to go through the motions of allowing it but get a fee, kind of like everyone else does. But that's new to them, and the chair was asking different cities how much we charge and stuff like that. During the open session, it was brought up about House Bill 4001, which was introduced by Speaker Kotek to preempt cities' rights to ban shelters in residential zones. This is part of her initiative to solve the housing crisis. It's very contentious about this in Salem. You can figure OLC, the National League is not National League, excuse me, League of Oregon Cities. A lot of city councilors are totally against this on preemption of city rights, and so this is one of her key bills that she's going to run with. So you're aware of it. There was discussion about T2020 that I alluded to this morning at Washington County Coordinating Committee, that Chair Bernard said there were some shifts occurring in the Tier 1 and Tier 2 projects, that his interpretation and impression is that the 185th project and airport projects that are now Tier 1 might be demoted. Where there was big support, now is starting to wane or fade. And then that Highway 43 might go from a Tier 2 to Tier 1 for Clackamas County. I brought that up at the Washington County Coordinating Committee. That was kind of news to Washington County. Wasn't news to Wilsonville. So they're going to check into that because it looks like it's fluid again, what's Tier 1 and Tier 2. Our big concern, one of our top projects is 99W, and we're getting conflicting stories this morning that we have people saying 99W is a lock as a high priority, Tier 2, and then we have some people saying it's not going to happen. So it seems like they've got 5 more meetings left before this ends, so it's going to be interesting what happens as far as what's going to be Tier 1, Tier 2. Then what's next? So this morning, at Washington County Coordinating Committee, ODOT gave that tolling presentation, which I definitely want to have here, on how they're envisioning the process to unfold over the next few years. They're kind of separating 205 and I-5 projects and how they're approaching this, except for the technical committee. What the ODOT got beat up about the most was the diversity outreach, and what the mayors perceive as a lack of diversity outreach, that the electeds were not included, and we're even contacted on how ODOT's going to do this. And as Paul mentioned, I brought up, where are the public meetings in the beginning, but it was basically a verbiage difference that in but basically the first part of 2020, which is when they kicked this off, there's supposed to be significant public involvement. I'm just wondering where and how they're going to do this, to find out what the community feels like. Since depending on who you listen to, ODOT right now is basically looking at Abernathy area and a certain part of the stretch, 7 miles or so, I-5. But the legislature and Tina Kotek is saying, no, they want to look all interstate-wide tolling. They want to greatly expand it. So more to come on that. So it'd be interesting by the time they're here, maybe they might have an answer about, we might have an answer, how far Tina Kotek has gone, the speaker, with expanding the tolling conversation. Juan Carlos Gonzalez, Councilor Gonzalez, Metro presented the Here Together Community Initiative. Mayors, the mayors, when they see the need and the urgency, they're very upset and mad that this was put on the May ballot, because it's screwing up a lot of other cities with their initiatives, especially Tigard with their police levy. Mayors in Washington County was not consulted at all. MPAC wasn't involved. Nobody was involved in deciding to put this on the ballot in May, and they think it's very poor timing. While they agree on the need and stuff like that, but they don't think this is the right time to do it, considering the constraints we're going to be under. I brought up the Oregonian editorial that Mayor Truex didn't agree with, but I did agree with part of their comments about, I asked Councilor Gonzalez about what's Metro's capacity to do this. This is nothing they do. Now, how are they going to do this? Because they have no plan yet. And they're kind of rushing to get this through to get it on the May ballot. So we'll see. Lots of questions there. So tolling, got that done. Last thing is, got emails going back and forth, pretty hot and heavy. I'm going to put Councilor Kellogg on the spot. There's a bill called HB 4010, which wants to separate, if you will, the benefits of opportunity zones from the federal and the state, kind of like they do with the taxes. Most of the chambers in the area, chambers in the state, and any kind of economic development agencies are totally against them taking this away. Can you explain it a little bit better than I can?
I'll be happy to try to. So as briefly as I can, the Opportunity Zone credit is essentially a incentive to invest where you won't have to pay capital gains. You use capital gains that you have today to buy a property, and then when you sell that property inside an Opportunity Zone, you would owe no capital gains on it. The impetus behind the legislation was to invest in low-income census tracts, which is where the Opportunity Zones are located. So this bill would allow you to continue to claim the federal capital gains tax credit, but you would lose the ability to claim the state capital gains tax credit. So net about a 10% difference in what you would pay in taxes at a minimum. And so, the position, as I understand it, of the League of Oregon Cities is that what the state is doing by this legislation is they are disincentivizing investment in these low-income areas, and the projects that may have been built, which would have contributed to city and county property tax revenues, now still may be built because of the federal credit, but then the money on the state capital gains tax is going to go to the state and not to the cities and counties.
So they're asking for letters to be written from cities and anyone involved, and I saw a late email. Is Jonathan drafting something for Tualatin? Okay. Because, we have two opportunity zones here in town, and we all know and would love to use the one on Tualatin, Sherwood Road, around Dutch Bros, to do something there to redevelop that, may it one day be our beautiful downtown. And I hate to see this bill change things that we basically disincentivize developers from doing it. So you guys are okay with? All right. And I think that's, and I've emailed the League of Oregon Cities, seeing where they're standing on it. Thorn Run, who are semi-lobbyists through MMC, to see what they're doing, because this seems to be a late-breaking thing, if you will, that wasn't even on the mayor's radars. Just like the enterprise zones coming back again, prevailing wage and enterprise zones came back, but I heard it's dead. It's dead. It's
At least
for now. Yep. So, but I think the opportunity zones definitely impact us. We don't have enterprise zones, but the OZs do. So we definitely want to weigh in and prevent that from happening. So let's go on to items removed from consent agenda.
Can
Go
I,
ahead, Paul.
real quick, I want to follow up on your comment on 99. The problem of what we're hearing and why you're hearing different stories is the proposal, somehow the proposal turned into a $200 million 99, 217, and Highway 26. 217 is officially dead, as you heard, and I heard that at the Clackamas County meeting, but we also heard that from Commissioner Rogers because of what ODOT's doing on their own for the auxiliary lanes. 26, I told Roy Rogers this, today, you got to separate that because absolutely no one's objecting to $1 million for 99 because they understand 1972 or something was the last time something was spent on that, and anybody and everybody who's ever had to drive anywhere, even from Clackamas County, they are familiar with 99 through Tigard. It's not news to anybody. It's like C to C and the Sunrise. If you have a kid who's been involved in sports, you know what that road is. So it's the same thing. And so I think the $1 million for 99, I believe, is going to get brought. Sounds like it brought in, but like you said, what was locked from that T2020 commission, and 100% for this and this and this, and then it all became fluid again. And out of the blue, they gave $184 million from McLaughlin Road that wasn't even in. That was a tier 3 that magically made it to tier 1 when nobody was lobbying for it. So, well, and then C to C and Sunrise made it because out of the blue, Metro and the governor's office are working on an emergency route and realized that that would be their only emergency route, and so they kind of need to build it.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was.
And Highway 43 becoming tier 1 gets a lot of votes in Lake Oswego and
there you go.
West Lynn. And going back to something Paul mentioned about when TriMet gave their update of the Southwest Corridor, they gave that this morning. They did mention the out-grade crossing and said they did look at the elevated grade, but the steering committee decided it was more important to get the Bridgeport so that it's still at grade, but they said there's still a note about maybe elevating it sometime in the future. Because they gave the same, I sat through the same Southwest Corridor update this afternoon. I forgot to mention Aging Task Force was this afternoon, and it was all transportation all the time, which is usual, the Aging Task Force. TriMet was there going over the Southwest Corridor plan. John Whitman from Ride Connection was there discussing the shuttle and trying to expand the shuttle with the funds from HB 2017. And then Garrett was there along with TriMet about getting shuttle service running, proposed shuttle service between Oregon City and Tualatin down Borderland Road. Looks like Clackamas County is going to try to do some funding for a study to get that moving, which is good news. And now I think I'm really done. Okay. Let's go on to the item removed from consent, which is item number 1, consideration of approval of a new liquor license application for the 60s Cafe and Diner. And Council Morrison requested to have it pulled and discussed separately.
Yeah, so Councilor Kellogg brought up a very interesting point at the work session, the last work session on marijuana, that alcohol was on a consent agreement and that marijuana was just another thing. And the point I wanted to make is I think there's a lot of us who have, and this word came to me and I wasn't sure it was the right word until I actually looked it up, and I'm surprised that it was the first word I thought of and happened to be the appropriate word, that I acquiesce to this liquor problem. I've, since the day I got on council, have wanted to look at these individually. I want to look at some kind of a comprehensive plan, and the city doesn't have one. We have one of the highest metro alcohol license to populations in the area. We want to talk about enforcement. There were 1 regulatory specialist for 162 liquor licenses back in 2002. There's now 1 to 354. The state's really proud of their business, and as everyone likes to point out, it's an important part of Oregon's business, and it's and yes, it's a retail product, but it's alcohol's associated with a lot of different issues. And so one of the things that has been on my list for a long time, and I wasn't sure how to approach it, this kind of was the gateway, pardon the pun, to approach it, is that I would like to see us start reviewing these individually. I'd like to see us start to set up a plan of best practices, specifically look at the number of outlets that we have, and do we want to limit them? What types of outlet? The concentration, are we all going to set all of our alcohol things in the common area? Do we want them spread out? And then when someone applies, there's a checklist that are they meeting the requirements that the city has set down for guidelines in terms of establishing a liquor license in town. And then if they're not, and for example, there's a couple of restaurants that have open bars. It's a part of the restaurant. That's not a best practice. I think of Lee's Kitchen, where their bar is completely separate. Red Robin, it's off to the side and it's limited. And there are others, and I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but they're just open and they're not limited to adults. Because part of the problem is, and the more we get into this marijuana issue, the more we get into alcohol, the more we get into drug abuse, the easier it is, the more visible it is, the more dangerous it is, in particular to youth. And so, but it's also a problem with adults. So that's what I'm throwing out there on this. We have an awful lot. Someone said we had 77 licenses. I looked it up. We did, last year we approved 76 liquor licenses. We then did a follow-up with 11 late licenses, and then through the year we approved 4 more. Now, we may have dropped a few, but I know we dropped Cecilia, but that just moved from the place next to Donaland, moved into Cecilia's, and now this one is replacing that one, so we haven't lost any in this whole transition. We still have the same number of liquor licenses, and so it's a concern, and I know it's been brought up by a couple of other counselors to make various references to it, and so it's something that I think needs to be on our agenda going forward.
Just to follow up on that, so this has popped up before at the mayor's meetings, and this is a question for Sean. I know OLCC has a process. I know the police department pretty much drives the process. They do all the background checks and make sure those things that are required by OLCC are done. But per most of the mayors, because this has come up, like I said, the cities really don't have a heck of a lot of leverage with this, that the only way you can deny a permit is if you have something really red hot that OLCC does not know of, or there's not common knowledge, that pretty much you have zero control over this. It's just basically the police department does their background checks, it clears. That's not much you can do unless you have something. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the cities really can't regulate the liquor license process. There's a process that allows for cities to make a recommendation, and that's what part of the background check is and things of that nature. But yes, you're correct. The statutes outline when you can and cannot get a license, and so you have to, your criteria or whatever you're commenting on has to address those licensing criteria that would otherwise allow OLCC to do further investigation or reject the license.
And even when the local jurisdiction calls it into a public hearing, like has information, and even if the local jurisdiction says we don't want it, OLCC can still approve it. Still approves it. Like, we don't have any impact on OLCC. We went through this when STARS was coming to town, and Councilor Grimes and
before my time.
You weren't on yet. And we had a big public hearing and went down to OLCC and provided testimony, and it was to no avail. Like, it was no impact.
Because I agree with some of what you're saying, Paul, but it's like they've handcuffed us. It's preemption. It's a state preemption of city rights. Bridget.
I want to say something a little bit optimistic. Just coming from, I grew up outside Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where there's a lot of bars and a lot of alcohol and a lot of all of it. And one of the things about here, when you were talking about separating best practices with restaurants, in Milwaukee, you don't have to ever serve food at any bar. So to have bars have to serve food, those things people that have lived here for a long time might just take for granted, but there are plenty of corner bars all over the country where all you provide is alcohol.
Potato chips.
Sometimes there's chips if you're lucky. They have pickled eggs at some, you know, it's like, so I wanted to say that. And then I don't know what's going in. I know that the place that moved into Cecilia's moved from another location, but I don't know what's going in there. So they're,
The one we're approving now is going into the old location where the one that just moved into Cecilia's.
oh, okay. So anyway, there we go.
Rotating chairs.
And then the last thing I'll say is, I do like the fact that it's not going to be a vacant storefront like some of our other locations are, so.
So we have to approve the license. So I have a motion.
Second.
Yeah, I mean, we removed it from consent, but we still have to, don't we? or-
Second.
Don't we have
He
to
motioned.
approve it? Don't we have to do the motion and stuff like to approve it, or?
If
Just
you
be public
want to
consent?
approve it, yes. Yeah. But you do, there's a, yeah, right. There's nothing that requires you to approve the application.
So, one reason why I'm happy to make the motion is my goal was, there were several reasons for my goal. But I do not want to deny them their liquor license, and I'm not interested in that. What I'm more interested in is down the road, looking at some kind of best practices, which, and I know, and I understand there are a few loopholes that will allow us to maybe do that, and we're still researching that about what that is, but you know, like I said, it's really is tough. But I also wanted to bring that out because I think the point was made during a different discussion that, hey, we're just rubber stamping this, and my point was I understood we had to, and I wanted not only to prove that point, but I wanted to make sure that that was correct, and so that point's been proven to me now by our city attorney. Thank you very much.
Who? Okay, so I have a motion and a second to approve the new liquor license application for 60s Cafe and Diner. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Anything else for the good of the order?
Motion to adjourn?
Got a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Good evening. Thank you.